Have you ever noticed that the hardest battles are often the ones no one can see? The quiet war inside your chest between what you show the world and what you silently endure. We all try to manage it. We pray for strength. We build walls. We say, I'm fine. But what if healing doesn't begin with fighting harder? What if it begins the moment you stop doing it alone and let God in? We are so used to equating surrender with weakness that the very idea of it feels threatening. From the time we're young, we're taught to push harder, to fight longer, to never give up. The world rewards strength, resilience, control. So when life starts to collapse under its own weight, our instinct is to tighten our grip. We tell ourselves that if we just hold on a little longer, we'll manage it. If we just try harder, we'll fix it. We mistake endurance for healing and control for faith. But there comes a moment, quiet, terrifying, and holy, when you realize that all your strength is doing is keeping you stuck. You're fighting to survive in a battle that was never meant to be won by force. Surrender doesn't mean giving up on life, on dreams, or on hope. It means letting go of the illusion that you can carry it all alone. It's not collapse, it's release. It's the soft, trembling decision to unclench your fists and whisper, I can't do this by myself. There's something sacred about that admission. Because when you stop trying to be your own savior, you finally make space for something greater than you to step in. That's the paradox. The moment you stop fighting to control everything, you discover a deeper kind of strength, one that doesn't come from you but moves through you. We resist surrender because it threatens our sense of identity. We think, if I let go, who will I be? We're afraid of what will happen if we're not the one steering the ship. But when you've tried every possible way to fix your own storm and it still rages, perhaps it's not about doing more. Perhaps it's about opening the door to a presence that has been waiting all along. Maybe it's not about finding the answer. Maybe it's about allowing yourself to be found. Surrender is not a single act. It's a rhythm. Some days you'll open your hands easily. Other days you'll hold on until your knuckles ache. It's not about getting it right. It's about returning again and again to that place where your strength ends and grace begins. It's in that returning that transformation quietly happens. The moment you surrender, you stop performing and start being. You stop defending and start listening. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? When you live from a place of surrender, you begin to see that your battle is no longer something to survive, but something to learn from. You stop asking for the storm to end and start asking what it came to teach you. And in that shift, something softens inside you. The bitterness starts to dissolve. The fear starts to lose its grip. You begin to sense a calm that doesn't come from your circumstances changing, but from your spirit remembering it was never alone. We think that surrender will make us smaller, but in truth, it makes us expansive. The moment you let go of the need to prove, you make space for presence. When you stop fighting to be enough, you start feeling enough. And when you stop trying to control the outcome, you begin to trust the process. You begin to see that the struggle itself was never the enemy. It was the invitation. Every moment of resistance, every wave that pushed against you was trying to bring you to this point of release, to the moment you stop fighting life and start flowing with it. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that surrender is not the end of your battle, but the beginning of your healing. It's the moment when the weight you've been carrying doesn't disappear, but it finally feels lighter because you're no longer carrying it alone. You feel it in your breath. You feel it in your body. The tension starts to ease. The panic starts to quiet. You start to realize that you don't have to hold everything together. You never did. It's hard to trust what you cannot see, but faith often begins where logic ends. When you surrender, you stop trying to make sense of every pain and start finding meaning in it. You stop demanding answers and start receiving peace. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of something sacred in the middle of it. So when you reach that breaking point, when the strength you've always relied on no longer feels enough, maybe that's not the end. Maybe that's the beginning of something divine. Because surrender is not the moment you lose control, it's the moment you realize you were never meant to carry it all. We live in a culture that celebrates strength and hides pain. We are praised for how well we hold ourselves together, how quickly we move on, how little we let anyone see us break. We post smiles while we ache inside. We answer, I'm fine, when we're anything but fine. Somewhere along the way, we learn that pain makes us undesirable, that it makes others uncomfortable, that it makes us weak, and so we hide it. We tuck it away behind productivity, behind perfection, behind politeness. But what happens when the very thing you're hiding is the key to your healing? Pain, when hidden, becomes poison. It festers in silence. It hardens the heart, tightens the body, and whispers lies about your worth. You start to believe that what you feel disqualifies you from being loved, from being chosen, from being whole. You start to believe that your story is too heavy to be held. But the truth is, the pain you hide doesn't disappear. It just buries your light, and the longer you keep it buried, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you started pretending. There's something powerful that happens when you stop hiding your pain and bring it into the light. Not to perform it, not to justify it, but to simply allow it to be seen. The moment you stop apologizing for your sadness and start honoring it as something sacred, something shifts. The energy it takes to suppress what hurts begins to transform into the energy that heals. You start to see that your pain isn't the end of your story. It's the soil where your purpose begins to grow. Pain only begins to make sense when it's held, not hidden. When you bring your broken pieces before God, or even before someone who can hold space for you, you create the possibility of transformation. Because pain that is shared becomes connection. Pain that is voiced becomes strength. And pain that is offered becomes purpose. It's not that the wound disappears, but it stops defining you. It stops being the center of your identity and starts becoming the foundation of your empathy. We often think healing means feeling nothing, but real healing means feeling everything safely. It means learning to sit with your ache long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you. Maybe your pain isn't there to punish you. Maybe it's there to reveal you, to show you what matters, what still hurts, and what needs tending. Pain, in its strange way, invites intimacy, not just with others, but with yourself. It reminds you that you are human, that you still care, that you still have a heart that longs to be made whole. When you let God into that pain, you stop being alone in it. You stop being the only one trying to make sense of it. You let grace step in where guilt once lived. You begin to see your tears not as weakness, but as prayers, raw, wordless, and real. Sometimes healing doesn't come in the form of answers or solutions. Sometimes it comes in the quiet, knowing that your pain is seen, that it matters, that it's held by something greater than your own strength. We spend so much energy running from the parts of ourselves that hurt. We stay busy, we distract ourselves, we numb. But what if the part of you that you're running from is the part that God most wants to reach? The place where the pain lives is often the place where He wants to build something new. And you can't rebuild what you refuse to face. When you start to see your pain as sacred, as the very ground where transformation happens, shame loses its grip. You begin to walk lighter because you no longer have to hide. The things that once made you feel unworthy start to become the reason someone else feels less alone. That's the quiet miracle of it. Your pain, once shared, becomes a source of comfort to another. What once made you ache now gives you language for compassion. What once made you feel forgotten now allows you to see the unseen. Healing doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. It means you'll stop running from what hurts. It means you'll learn to meet your own pain with tenderness instead of judgment. You'll begin to understand that the cracks don't ruin you. They reveal where the light gets in. And when you finally stop hiding, you realize you were never unworthy. You were just unfinished. Pain becomes purpose when you stop hiding it. It becomes a living testimony that broken things can still be beautiful, that wounded hearts can still love, that what was once your burden can become your blessing. Because when you let your pain be seen, it no longer controls you, it frees you. And that freedom, that quiet courage to be honest about your scars, is where true healing begins. We spend so much of our lives trying to become ready for grace. We think we need to fix ourselves before we can be loved, polish our edges before we can be seen, and get it all together before we can be accepted. We imagine that God is waiting at the top of some invisible ladder, expecting us to climb our way up with perfect faith, perfect behavior, perfect words. So we hide the mess, we hide the doubts, the contradictions, the parts of us that don't look holy enough. We pray from a distance, thinking that if we just improve a little more, he'll finally show up. But the truth is far more tender than that. God doesn't need perfection. He needs permission. He doesn't wait for your life to look clean. He steps into it exactly as it is. The reason this is hard to believe is because we've been conditioned to think love must be earned. We've learned to associate worth with performance, acceptance with achievement. We've spent years building identities around how capable we are, how strong, how successful, how in control. So when life cracks open, when the things we used to rely on start to crumble, we feel exposed, vulnerable. And instead of reaching out for connection, we pull away. We convince ourselves that until we can offer something better, we should keep our distance. But God isn't moved by our image. He's moved by our honesty. He doesn't require a polished version of you. He just waits for the real one. It's in the mess, not the masterpiece, that his presence feels most alive. The quiet moments when you whisper, "I don't know what to do anymore." The mornings you wake up with a heavy heart but choose to keep breathing. The nights when the silence feels unbearable and you reach out anyway. That's where he meets you, not in your perfection, but in your permission. The permission to be seen as you are, to be held even when you don't feel deserving, to let love in before you've cleaned up the mess. There's something profoundly healing about realizing that you don't have to impress the divine. You don't have to have the right words or the perfect prayer. You don't have to know the outcome. You just have to be open. Sometimes it's as simple as whispering, "Here I am, still hurting, still uncertain, but here." Because in that moment, something shifts. You stop performing faith and start experiencing it. You stop treating your relationship with God as a transaction and start feeling it as a connection. We spend so much time trying to be worthy that we forget we already are. Worthiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you remember. It's the quiet truth that was there before the shame, before the fear, before the world told you that you had to earn love. And when you begin to remember that, you begin to see how close God has always been, not waiting for you to change, but patiently standing beside you as you try. Sometimes we mistake distance for disapproval. We think that because we can't feel his presence, he must have left. But absence doesn't always mean abandonment. Sometimes silence is space, the kind of space that allows you to hear your own heart again, the kind that invites you to trust what you can't see. God's presence is rarely loud. It's not a shout, it's a whisper. And it's often found in the very places we thought were too dark to be holy. When you give him permission to enter those places, the shame you can't name, the fear you hide, the doubts you bury, something sacred happens. You begin to realize that the parts of you thought disqualified you are actually the places he wants to dwell. The brokenness becomes the meeting ground for grace. The imperfection becomes intimacy. You start to understand that faith isn't about presenting a flawless image. It's about standing unguarded in your truth and still believing you're loved. This kind of permission is not passive, it's brave. It's the courage to open your heart in a world that teaches you to protect it. It's the choice to let go of control, to stop managing how love finds you, to stop editing how grace arrives. It's the quiet strength of saying, "I'm not enough on my own, but I'm willing to be met here." And when you do that, when you let God into the raw, unfiltered spaces of your life, you realize he was never waiting for your readiness. He was waiting for your invitation. We think God moves when we act, but often he moves when we allow. When we stop striving, stop performing, stop pretending, and simply make room. That's when faith becomes less about effort and more about encounter. That's when love stops being an idea and becomes an experience. Because the truth is, he's never been impressed by perfection. He's drawn to presence, to the quiet, trembling, honest heart that dares to be real. The healing begins not when you fix yourself, but when you finally allow yourself to be found. It's easy to believe that when life falls apart, it means something has gone wrong. We tend to measure God's presence by how comfortable we feel, how peaceful everything looks, how smooth the path seems. But what if the struggle isn't proof of his absence, but of his preparation? What if the silence isn't punishment, but the space where strength is born? We often forget that growth rarely happens in light. It happens underground. Roots don't develop in sunlight. They deepen in darkness. And the same is true for the soul. There are seasons when everything feels still, when prayers seem to bounce back from the ceiling, when every effort feels wasted. You question if you've been forgotten, if your faith has failed, if you've somehow stepped out of alignment. But it's often in those very moments that the groundwork for transformation is quietly being laid. The delay isn't denial, it's development. The waiting isn't wasted, it's sacred. When God is preparing you for something greater, He often takes you through places that strip away what cannot come with you. It's not cruelty, it's calibration. You start losing things you once thought were essential. People leave, opportunities close, plans unravel, and your first instinct is to hold on tighter, to fight harder, to fix it. But sometimes what feels like a breakdown is really a clearing. The ground must be emptied before it can be planted again. Preparation often looks like loss before it looks like blessing. The door that closes might actually be protection. The delay that frustrates you might be timing in disguise. The unanswered prayer might be mercy you don't yet understand. We only see in fragments, but He sees the whole story. And the moments that don't make sense right now often become the ones that redefine everything later. Think about the moments in your life that truly changed you. The deep ones, the real ones. How many of them were easy? How many came without struggle, without uncertainty, without pain? Probably none, because the heart doesn't grow through ease. It grows through tension. It stretches through waiting. It learns trust through what it cannot control. It's in those moments of confusion and discomfort that faith becomes more than a word. It becomes muscle. We want the victory without the training. We want clarity without the questioning. We want purpose without the pressure. But purpose is shaped in the dark places, in the unseen spaces, where nothing feels certain. That's where trust is forged. You start to realize that faith isn't believing everything will turn out your way. It's believing that even if it doesn't, you'll still be held. It's not about certainty, it's about surrender. And in that surrender, you start to see how every detour, every disappointment, every delay was actually preparing you to carry what you once prayed for. Sometimes God lets us sit in the discomfort because that's where our dependence deepens. He allows us to be stripped of what's temporary so we can recognize what's eternal. And though the process hurts, it's not meant to harm. It's meant to build resilience, depth, compassion. You become softer and stronger at the same time. Softer toward others who suffer, and stronger in your capacity to endure. The very battle you wanted to escape becomes the classroom that teaches you who you are and who He is. It's hard to trust when everything looks like loss, but faith isn't about what you see. It's about who you believe is working behind what you can't. You start to recognize that the silence doesn't mean abandonment. The delay doesn't mean disinterest. It's in the quiet spaces of preparation that your roots grow deeper. So when the winds come, you don't break, you bend. You stop being shaped by your fear and start being shaped by your faith. Maybe this is what divine timing really means. Not that everything happens when you want it to, but that everything unfolds when you're ready to carry it. We often ask for things that our character isn't yet strong enough to sustain. So the waiting becomes grace. The challenge becomes training. The discomfort becomes the refining fire that ensures what's being built in you will last. One day, you'll look back at the season that almost broke you and realize it actually built you. You'll see how every unanswered question, every closed door, every painful ending was quietly rearranging the pieces of your story into something whole. The very place you thought was empty will reveal itself as holy ground, because the battle was never punishment. It was preparation. There comes a point in every struggle when you realize that what's breaking you isn't just the pain itself. It's the loneliness inside it. That sense that no one really understands what you're going through, that no one can carry it with you, that no one can make it stop. You wake up heavy. You move through your day like a shadow of yourself. And even when people ask how you're doing, the words that want to come out get caught in your throat. Because how do you explain a battle that's happening entirely inside your heart? How do you make someone understand a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from your body, but from your soul? For so long, we think the only way out is to fight harder. We brace ourselves, we push through, we tell ourselves to just keep going. And maybe for a while that works, but eventually your strength runs out. You find yourself staring at the same problem, the same pain, the same emptiness, and realizing that no matter how much you do, it doesn't change. That's usually when something inside you breaks, not in a destructive way, but in a sacred one. Because the moment you stop pretending you can do it all by yourself is the moment something begins to shift. When you let God into your battle, it doesn't mean the war immediately ends. The storm doesn't suddenly vanish. The waves don't stop crashing. But what changes, what completely transforms, is that you're no longer the only one standing in the middle of it. You're no longer carrying it alone. You begin to sense a presence beside you, not fixing everything in an instant, but anchoring you through it. And somehow that presence changes everything. Because healing doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like endurance with peace. When you try to face every battle in isolation, your pain starts to echo back at you. It fills every space in your mind until it's the only voice you can hear. But when you invite God into that space, it's like a new voice enters the room, one that speaks softly, yet carries the weight of eternity. It reminds you that even if the situation doesn't change right away, you are still seen, still loved, still held. That simple awareness starts to dissolve the loneliness, even if the circumstances haven't moved. The battle doesn't lose its power because it disappears. It loses its power because you stop believing you have to survive it alone. You begin to notice that you can breathe again, that you can rest again, even in the middle of the chaos. You begin to realize that healing isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of peace in the middle of it. It's not that everything suddenly becomes easy. It's that everything starts to make sense in a different way. You no longer measure hope by how quickly things change, but by how deeply you can trust through what remains. When you walk with God through your struggle, you start to understand that pain doesn't always need to be solved. It needs to be shared. You stop running from the parts of your story that hurt and start seeing them as the places where grace shows up most powerfully. The nights you thought you wouldn't make it become proof that you were never truly alone. The tears you thought were weakness turn out to be the evidence of your faith. Every scar begins to carry a quiet testimony, not of what broke you, but of what held you together when everything else was falling apart. There's something profoundly beautiful about realizing that you don't have to wait for peace to come after the battle. You can have peace within it. You can have stillness even while the noise continues. You can have strength even when the fear hasn't left. Because when God steps into the center of your struggle, the weight that once crushed you becomes something you can carry. The situation might not shift, but your spirit does. You begin to stand differently. You breathe differently. You stop being defined by the fight, and you start being defined by the faith that carries you through it. Healing doesn't mean the absence of conflict or pain. It means the presence of connection. It's the quiet realization that you don't need every question answered to keep moving forward. You don't need every wound to close before you can feel peace. You just need to know you're not walking alone. You just need to trust that what's holding you is stronger than what's hurting you. So even when the battle rages, even when the path ahead feels uncertain, you can rest. You can rest not because everything is solved, but because you're no longer the only one fighting. You can stop trying to control every outcome and start allowing grace to meet you where your strength ends. And in that surrender, in that quiet companionship, something miraculous happens. The battle doesn't end, but the fear does. The pain doesn't vanish, but the loneliness does. And that's when you finally understand what healing really means. It's not when everything stops hurting. It's when you realize you were never meant to carry it alone. There's a moment that comes after the chaos, after the crying, after all the prayers that seem to go unanswered. It's quiet, almost disorienting in its stillness. You look around and maybe the situation hasn't changed much. The loss is still real, the questions still linger, the wounds haven't fully healed, but something feels different. It's not the world that shifted, it's you. You begin to realize that the real miracle was never about the storm stopping. It was about who you became in the storm. For most of our lives, we think of miracles as events that happen outside of us. Circumstances changing, doors opening, sicknesses vanishing, answers appearing. But some of the most powerful miracles happen in silence, deep within the human heart. They happen when bitterness turns into compassion, when fear gives way to trust, when you wake up one morning and realize that the thing that used to break you no longer holds the same power. It still hurts, yes, but it no longer defines you. That's a miracle too, just a quieter one. We often overlook this kind of transformation because it doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself. You don't notice it until one day you find yourself responding differently. Where you once felt anger, you feel understanding. Where you once felt shame, you feel gentleness. The same pain that used to consume you has now become a teacher. The same heart that used to carry resentment has learned to release it. Healing doesn't always roar. It often whispers. It's not a lightning strike. It's a sunrise. Gradual, faithful, certain. When God steps into your struggle, He doesn't always rearrange the outside world. He rearranges the inside one. He begins to rebuild you in ways you didn't know were possible. You start to notice that you can breathe through things that used to suffocate you. You can forgive what you never thought you could forgive. You can hold sorrow and peace in the same heart without collapsing under their weight. That's not denial. That's divine transformation. You learn that strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how deeply you can love, even after what you've endured. It's about the tenderness that grows in the cracks, the humility that comes from falling and rising again, the wisdom that pain carves into your soul. You start to see that the battle wasn't just something you went through. It was something that went through you, reshaping you from the inside out. And somewhere along the way, you realize that you're no longer fighting the same way you used to. You're no longer driven by fear or control. You begin to live from a place of peace rather than panic, from trust rather than tension. The world around you might still be unpredictable, but your spirit has become anchored. You can feel the winds without being carried away by them. You can walk through uncertainty without losing your center. That's what divine healing does. It doesn't take you out of reality. It grounds you more deeply within it. There's a kind of beauty that can only be born from brokenness, the kind that comes when you stop running from your pain and allow it to refine you. It's the beauty of becoming softer, more compassionate, more awake to the fragility and wonder of life. You stop needing everything to make sense. You stop needing to control every outcome. You simply start to trust the process of becoming. And that quiet trust is itself a miracle, because it means your heart has learned to rest in something greater than certainty. The transformation within you doesn't always look glorious at first. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion, like surrender, like letting go of a dream you held too tightly. But with time, those endings reveal themselves as beginnings. The pieces you thought were lost start to take new shape. The places that once felt like emptiness begin to fill with purpose. You start to understand that every time something was taken from you, something else was being made in you. And maybe that's what God was doing all along. Not changing your situation, but changing your sight. Not removing the mountain, but strengthening your legs to climb it. Not silencing the storm, but teaching you how to dance with the wind. You thought the miracle would be around you, but it turned out to be within you. Because the truth is, the most extraordinary thing that can happen in a human life is not the avoidance of pain, but the transformation that follows it. When you look back and realize that the person you've become could only have been formed through what you've walked through, you begin to see everything differently. You stop seeing your scars as reminders of failure and start seeing them as evidence of grace. That's the quiet power of letting God into your battle. The world around you may never know the full story of how you got here, how many nights you wanted to give up, how much strength it took just to stay. But you know, and that knowing, the awareness of who you've become, of how far you've come, is the miracle that no one can take away. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that life changed, it's that you did.